Hello and welcome to the Sound on Sound podcast about electronic music and all things synth. I'm Caro C, and in this episode I'm talking with Eska. A Mercury Prize nominee for her debut album, which came out 10 years ago, Eska composed, produced and arranged her second album, The Ordinary Life of a Magic Woman, which was released in May 2025. She describes her sound as Afrofuturism, industrial pop, alternative rock, soul, R&B, jazz and hip-hop. Eska has collaborated with artists such as Shabaka Hutchings, Dave Okumu, Kay Tempest and Grace Jones, as well as producing music for film, TV, theatre and currently opera. Starting out as a jazz singer, here we unpack Eska's journey down the rabbit hole of production and technology. As is customary, we start with a taste of Eska's music. This is an extract of a track called All the Way Down from the aforementioned recent album, The Ordinary Life of a Magic Woman. So, hello Eska and welcome to the Sound on Sound podcast.
How you doing, Caro?
I'm all right, thank you. So, so much to unpack with your work. Let's start with, looking into how you got to where you are, your journey into music.
You know, beginning my journey with production, Sound on Sound was right there. It was right there at the beginning. And in fact, it was there before. Because I was picking up magazines in various studios, picking up my friends' magazines, you know, and whether they be bedroom producers or the studios elsewhere, and feeling like, wow, I need to absorb this. I need to, you know, this is a safe space. I can read this, I can absorb this, I can digest this and figure things out for myself, you know, or figure things out alongside Sound on Sound. And the other thing that I wanted to add, because it was just that the first bit of gear that I bought, because it's so precious, because this is what started me off in production. It was the Yamaha QY70. And those who know, right? It's this little box, okay, about this, what sort of the size of a small book. And this little thing had lots of sounds in it, and it was a multi-track unit, right? Digital. And I bought it because it was portable, and you could, I literally was taking it on the road with me. So I was playing in other people's bands, going on the road, and I could put my headphones on, plug into the QY70, and it was the first productions that I ever made. And this was before I was trying to think of, is there a way I can avoid going the computer route, and this QY70, I thought, because I can't go on the road with a computer. I didn't have a laptop or anything like that, and this was basically the beginnings of constructing, multi-tracking ideas. And I became a complete QY70 evangelist, right? I think I managed to get a couple of people to buy one, but they both confessed that they never really used it. It was just like I was a really good salesperson for this thing. I know that there were several tracks that were made on there that eventually I did with the band, and we recorded them. I owe a lot to that little device. I guess I've always been a curious child. From my beginnings in professional music work as a songwriter and as a singer, I recall going into a studio and just looking at all the gear and being with whichever producer I was with, and being that slightly annoying person that would be, what does that do? And about that one, what are you doing there? What do you mean by panning? And what does that, and what does that do? And, some would be more patient than others. The funny thing as well was that from a female perspective, it was very interesting where there would definitely be that group of men that would be like, why do you want to know? Which I thought was a really interesting response to my curiosity. And then there would be, the others who would just be like, oh right, yeah, this means that, and this does that. And for me, the more information I got regarding the gear that I was using, the more I felt like I could play with it as a musician. And that was really empowering. That was really exciting. And that only gave me more possibilities from a compositional, creative point of view. And so that was what actually interested me in music and tech. It was the possibilities that it opened up for my musicianship. And that, I mean, I'll take that from any source, whether that be a new instrument or a new bit of tech. That suddenly is a portal into actually learning about my musicianship in a deeper way. That's ultimately what it's about for me. And that's ultimately what got me curious about music tech.
That is so interesting, because I was at a conference once called Women in Sound, Women on Sound. And there was a woman there who was a professor, and I think she taught music tech. And she said, we actually need to get rid of music tech. So just get rid of it. Just call it music.
I love that.
Why separate them?
I love that.
And that's exactly what you're saying, as they were saying, if a classical singer goes into a studio and they can't say, I want less reverb, I want less compression, they're disempowered. And yet if they know, like you say, if they know they can play with these techniques, these tools, these processes, that feeds into, they're not separate. And that's exactly what you said. And listening to your music, I can hear, like, your vocals are quite, gymnastic was the first word that came to mind for me. Like you do a lot of flitting around in a wonderful way. Obviously, you've worked for a long time with your voice. Let's just say for the human voice itself, you go in there with that instrument. Once you know what's possible,
for me, it's all about chasing a compositional idea, and that's what the tech supports, facilitates, enhances. And suddenly, I will approach a melody or whatever, a composition differently just because I've put, whatever plugin I've put on it. Suddenly it's changing the way in which I'm feeling. Everything changes internally. Literally, it's a physical reaction, because we're talking about vibrations at the end of the day, right? And so this is what gets me going. It's the vibrations, good vibrations, or bad ones even. Whatever those vibrations are that I want to play with my composition in order to basically tell the story. And that ultimately was what I understood about what the jump off is for me with music making. It's the best way that I can to tell a story, and using these with all these tools at my disposal to do that. And then over time, as is true of all producers, you can tell they found their favorite they found their favorite plugins, or they've found their favorite chain or processes in order to enhance on a particular feeling. So from a vocal point of view, there are an awful lot of fun things that I like to do, and but I'm constantly experimenting with that. That's gonna just continue, I think, forever, as long as I make music.
And are you the kind of person who will keep trying? Oh, someone says, try this plugin, try that plugin, try the Valhalla, try the Sound Toys. Or are you like, I'm okay, I've got my toys and tools?
Girl, it's so interesting, because I guess there are some people it's like, you know what, I've got my chain, I like how my voice sounds, that's that, and that's me, and that's how I sound. But I am a little bit of a sucker for, an ad that might pop up. Honestly, Karen, the number of times, all right, I have to try and talk myself out of buying some stupid plug-in for 20 quid just to come. I just said, no, stop it, because you know full well that they've got other things in the chain that are making it sound that way. This is not the Holy Grail. Just stop it. So there is sometimes that goes on, but I mean, like, when I'm thinking, like, look, I've got my door up now and I'm just trying to think of things that I really enjoy and definitely were game changers for me. There was one track on the recent album, and I'd sung the lead vocal I don't know how many times, and I was convinced that, geez, man, what is wrong with you? You're you should do a better vocal take. I thought it was the vocal take, and after about 3 days, I went, stop it, Esk. I sat down. This is a good. You're not going to sing it any better, and I realised it was just the EQ. It was a eureka moment. As usual, my main tutor, Sound on Sound was the Bible, in my beginnings. And now YouTube has kind of become the Bible in a way where, I'll go on YouTube and get, right, okay, vocal, what is up with this vocal take? How can I make it better? And then, invariably there's an 18-year-old telling you. It's wonderful. I love YouTube in terms of education for production. It has taught me so much and continues to be a go-to place. But when I can't, I can't remember who to thank for this, but the Aosis Air EQ Premium, saw this guy use it on YouTube, and he was doing a tutorial on how to sort of max it out, bring a bit of air, essentially kind of dealing with the top end really. And I put this on, played about with it, and for my ears, it was like a completely different vocal take, completely different, just because of the EQ. And so for me, when I discover things like that and go, geez, like just the right EQing of a vocal can literally take it from mediocre to, actually singing, that makes me super curious about sound, that it can work that way. And also, I guess, where the voice is sitting in the mix, obviously. And I wanted this particular vocal take on the track called Touch I wasn't finding its place in the mix, and actually that EQ somehow it got it over the line, and I was really super happy with how that came out. And then I was introduced to a plugin that I'm trying not to make it my new ketchup, which is the Arturia FX Fragments. I don't know if you know it. It makes everything celestial. And who doesn't mind a bit of celestial kind of sonics? So there are those things that, from recommendations of other producers, other music makers, that that just open up ideas and imagination and creativity. And that's what it's about. And I think you're right, from the conference that you went to, and that professor talking about the music technology is an extension of all that we're trying to create and all that we're trying to do. At the end of the day, most of the time, I'm making it up as I go along. And that is the truth. I'm just experimenting, but I'm really thankful for a day and age in which I'm able to do that in my own space. And that also I'm really thankful for YouTube in enabling me to get questions answered quickly, when maybe back in the day I'd have to sort of wait on someone to call me back and find half an hour to explain something to me. Invariably, you're going to find someone talking about it on YouTube. So that's super helpful, no doubt.
When you are working with your voice, like, for example, I'm thinking of your 2 albums a decade apart.
Yeah.
Are you choosing a particular chain, style, timbre, effects for that lead voice?
No, I don't think of it across the whole body of the work. I actually think of it like track by track. My songwriting approach is that the song, I trust that the composition will tell me what it wants to be. And then I have to just lean into that. I have long now ignored the voice that goes, yeah, but S, that doesn't work with the last thing that you did. And how about the thing before? And shouldn't it make sense with each other? Why? What, who said why? What's that about? For me, I want to be true to the song. Song is king, queen, like for me. And it's about the best way in which to present that. Okay, that might be quite a chameleon approach, but the truth is that is the kind of music maker I am. I am quite chameleon about the vocals. Having said that, though, Caro, if there is an overarching kind of sonics and the vocal approach with this album compared to the last one, I would definitely say that in this vocal chain there was a lot more distortion. As a general rule, I was pushing the distortion up a little bit. When I started out, there was this wonderful plug-in Camel Crusher, which that was my ketchup back there. I mean, I just put on everything, and for the life of me, I have no idea. I mourned the day that Camel Crusher disappeared. Because there wasn't quite anything like it. There hasn't been anything quite like it. I mean, please, listeners, please get in touch with me and let me know what I need to please recommend the replacement for Camel Crusher. But that on the vocals is just, it's magic. It's really, if you want that crunchy, gritty sound, that was a good one for me. Yeah, I would say, yeah, track by track, composition by composition, really.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I think as a fresh pair of ears on it, I could hear an overall identity there.
Okay, interesting.
Like you say, sonics there. And even if you're tuning into each song, it's almost like maybe you're unconsciously aware of the overview, or it's of that time or something.
I think that was the mic for that album was the Neumann TLM 103. And that was my workhorse mic. And it's a really, really beautiful microphone and has done me well for the 10 years. But I tell you, I've recently managed to invest in the U87. And let me tell you, it's a beast. And I don't even think of myself as an audiophile, but having, when you've lived with the sound of your voice through a process for a long time, you can tell when you're not, it's the change, and that it's so markedly different. It's unbelievable. There was actually a composition I was halfway through with the vocals, and it was all a cappella, and I had to do the whole thing again because my voice sounded so different, like I couldn't match it, and that was incredible for me to think, wow, okay, both Neumanns, but the U8, okay, I can see why this is rated the way I can hear it. I definitely can with my, and not only that, I actually had to, it was like I had to sing differently into it. It's so, the clarity is so ridiculous that I had to be much more aware. I became much more aware of my breathing.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Like this, the U87 is gorgeous. I feel like I'm singing to someone. That's the only way I can describe. It's a really beautiful microphone, and I just thought, you know what? I've been singing long enough. I am worthy of having one of my own and not having to borrow one. So yeah.
And do people buy them new these days, or do you get them secondhand?
It's kind of like an updated version of it. It's not like the original.
Yeah.
Purportedly just as good as.
Yeah.
I've got no complaints with this. I've got no complaints with this at all. But like I said, this has been about 6 months, and I'm still learning this mic. I'm still learning this mic. I mean, I'd also say that the other thing that changed in my chain in the last year is my audio interface. It was time for an upgrade, and I went for the Prism Lyra 2. And I am so happy with my vocal chain. This is the most killing vocal chain I've ever had. And I can, it's making a huge difference to just my approach to singing.
I bet.
Isn't that amazing?
I bet it is. And you're doing it at home then?
Oh no, well this is my studio. It's not, yeah, it's not at home, but I'm doing it all myself. I mean, yeah, I mean I've recorded my vocals, and even if collaborating with other people, I'm frequently, I record my own vocals, send them to people, whatever, that you can do that these days. It's a lot quicker because I'm right here. I'm right here. Logic's right here. To be honest with you, it cuts out a lot of time if I do it. There's no point. I haven't been recorded for a long time.
As a vocalist, has it changed your agency? You're then becoming the producer, you're becoming the director, aren't you? So instead of someone else deciding whether it's the right take, someone else deciding whether it's the best vocal you can do at that moment, you're doing that.
You got it. Oh yeah, big time. I think I've probably I come from a live background initially, and so for me, there's a very real distinction between being a live artist and being a recording artist.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, Carol, I was quite scared of being a recording artist, and I'd kind of probably lean into being a jazz musician as an excuse. It's like, I don't want to be beholden to document something and it be the final version of something. What does that even mean? Songs are living things, or they should be living things and open to interpretation, etc., etc., etc.
And evolving as you are.
Exactly, right? So all of that. And I really appreciate back in the day, I was certainly more a 70s artist, or, certainly pre-80s, where you'd find artists recording 2, 3, 4 versions of the same song over a period of time. And there's something I think, isn't that beautiful? It's funny that we don't do that these days, where you go, yeah, you know what? It's time to update my version of this song and come back to it as I've grown older, as my voice has changed, as the instrumentation that I'm using has changed. I mean, this is really, for me, that's a very interesting thing.
Well, also the more you perform it, because now, if you've got that process of, you might have performed a song, but then you release it and then you perform it quite a lot of time in some kind of touring form.
Yeah.
It's changed by the end of that process, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, for me, I still love live albums. I think in this day and age of Ableton, where literally live sounds exactly like the record, I think we're sort of missing the point, I think, for me, and maybe that's me as an improviser, but the wonderful thing I think about, what excites me about seeing an artist is actually how they're going to expand on this song and how they're going to communicate with this particular audience, and how things are going to change and how things are going to manifest in a different way. So yeah, it's sort of, that being able to revisit your work, I think, is quite a powerful thing to do, and certainly to give myself the agency, is like you said, of being able to record my voice and also being the one that can decide, okay, that's the take or that's not the take. That's been a really important journey for me to go on as a singer, because of in terms of growing in confidence with being a recording artist, because it really did it did take time for me to, and I'm on that journey where, okay, being a recording artist, what is it and how is it that I want to document this song, this particular composition? How am I going to document it? And learning about what I find enjoyable about my voice. That's going to be, it's subjective, right? What another producer, so whoever's punching me in and out is going to be hearing or looking out for a different quality to me. And actually, in the journey of production and music making in studio environments, I've had to come to a point of learning when to say, yeah, I like that, for myself. And I've got to be honest with you, Caro, from a singer's perspective, it saddens me that, and not enough women have that, go on that journey, are not encouraged to go on that journey for themselves, to learn what they enjoy about their instrument, if it's voice, particularly voice work. It's such a nuanced and sacred, that's the only way I can explain it, a sacred thing. It's a painful journey. It's not always pleasant to learn to understand it. And also because, obviously we got headphones on. How I hear my voice in headphones in the cans, compared to being in a space and an acoustic environment, the way in which I hear my voice, and the fact that you've got the reflection back, not only in terms of the actual sound waves, but then you also that you've got an audience. It's a completely different experience to of vocalizing, and learning how to adjust to those between those environments is a really incredible journey for anyone to allow themselves to go on, especially if they're able to spend the time by themselves in that process. I had a friend in the other day actually, and she was saying, she was like, oh gosh, I couldn't spend the number of hours that you do by yourself on your own. But I would say that there's an industry of women. We are able to spend a long period of time on our own with our gadgets. I think things are changing now that I think the digital age has really empowered women, more women, I think, to get more comfortable with being in tech spaces alone, because then you don't feel so alone when you've got YouTube. And like in the same way that I didn't feel so alone knowing that I had Sound on Sound to just read and read write-ups and reviews about gear that I was checking out and be part of that conversation as well, with my peers. That was important.
In a safe way.
In a safe way. Yeah. Probably, I suspect you, like me, you've got enough self-confidence to be able to ask those questions. And I don't care about asking the silly questions, quote unquote. Do you know what I mean? I just want to know what's going on.
Exactly. I think it's curiosity more than confidence.
Yeah, you're right. Curiosity.
As long as the desire outweighs the fear.
Yeah, you're right.
So I find it interesting that you had 2 albums a decade apart.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's a big journey in between there, but the first one was actually Mercury nominated, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So how did all that come about, and how has the decade in between led you to your new album? Just a small question.
Yeah. I think when I look back on that first record and the journey that led to a Mercury nomination, I think there were lots of factors, not only in terms of the record, it was also to do with the live work that was going around the record and the promotion of the record. A very different time to now, where I think in terms of press, and I'm sure Sound on Sound has probably been affected by this. I think just the digital age with information and the way in which people find information is very different now. But post that 2015 album, my daughter was only a year old, so life has been lifing. And in addition to that, I really wanted to explore how I could use music for storytelling. And it was always my ambition to write for film, theatre, and such. And I also got the opportunity to act as well for the first time in 2021. And so starting to act, it resonated with me as a performance artist and my curiosity about stories and storytelling. So when I got to do my first film score for Leo Lee's Sweet Sue, it was a baptism by fire. Just learning about beat mapping. My goodness, that was a challenge and a half, which I was so grateful for. And again, just learning on the job, really. Okay, how to sync visuals and sound. And also the way in which music behaves with visuals. Its behavior is very different. Again, it goes back to the curiosity thing, Caro. Like, that's what it was. It's just a curiosity about, okay, how and why does this work? Or why does it not work? All of that. And equally, getting to do music for podcasts, and how does sound work in an environment like that. This was the last one was India Rakusan's Child podcast, which you can find on BBC Sounds. A phenomenal podcast charting human development from conception right through to the first year of life. And so I contributed music to that. And again, I mean, loving to work with a brief, loving to work, it's completely different to then me as I am now, like today, kind of working on my own thing and just, okay, where do I begin? It's from trying to, the starting point can be as nebulous as I like, but when you're given a brief, like, okay, we want this to sound like the rush of the mother's blood through the veins, the baby's heartbeat pumping, and okay, what does that sound like? That excites me, to get a brief like that and to think, well, what does music, what kind of sound is that? And playing with found sounds as well. So it's a kind of different approach to music making with these kind of assignments that have come up over the last 10 years. But certainly, I was always chipping away with solo compositions. And it felt like, last year it felt like, okay, the coming together of a body of work finally that I felt like, okay, I can put my name on this. And actually, I feel like I'm making an artistic statement as Esker, So that's sort of been the journey, the 10-year journey.
And so do you think that's your MO then, to release an album every decade, or is it just how it's happened?
It's just how it happened. If anything, if I think of what would success look like moving forward, now that I'm in a different stage of my life, my daughter's 10 now, and I would love to be in a much more prolific era of music making and throwing caution to the wind, getting to explore different ways of composition, different composition approaches, getting back to some improvisation, which would be super fun for me. And different formats. I've always wanted to put out a cassette. And so, that kind of, I'm curious about that, what I would put on a cassette tape, things like that.
Wonderful. And in terms of then the music around your gymnastic voice, as I have accused you of, how does that work? Is it that you make the parts first, or if you have a reliable band of musicians, collecting musicians you work with, how do you build your orchestra, if you like, or your band?
Well, there were quite a few tunes on this record that started out as doodles with myself and my daughter's dad. They were kind of musical exercises. There wasn't really an outcome that we were looking for. Again, it was just following our ears and curiosity. Like, okay, I've just put this guitar part down. Right, over to you. What are you going to add to that? And then, okay, we'd kind of play ping pong with it, with a piece of sound, an idea. And over time, these ideas just got finessed to a point where some of them, it felt like, okay, I'd like a live band to play on top of them. And then so live instrumentation was superimposed on some of these ideas that started out as doodles, some of them all in the box. A lot of them were using acoustic instruments initially. And then I would be back in the studio chopping it up, arranging it and editing it. I had a wonderful production collaborator, Avi Barat, who showed me quite a few tricks and and licks as well. So it was when I think about it, the process was quite arduous in many ways. It wasn't a quick flowing production journey, one lifing, but also just the processes that I kept sort of introducing, whether it be, okay, we're going to add humans in there. Oh, okay, we're going to go back in the box. I've learnt some new production thing. Oh gosh, look, I found this new plugin. Oh, let me try. Lots of experimenting, basically, to try and create a new sound, to try and create a sonic landscape that would excite me enough to feel like I could be able to sing in this. Because often my voice would be the last thing that I put down.
Okay.
Yeah, so even if I do loads of kind of backing vocals, may be very intrinsic to the sort of the sonic world, the production. But in terms of that top line, even if I've got a top line in my head and, I've sketched it out using what I call yoga, I mean, it's like, yeah, or whatever, something like that. The final take on it will be done only when I feel like I've really sculpted a sonics that makes me want to sing. Like, I feel like, yeah, I want to sing in reaction to this world, So for me, singing is very much about reacting to the sonics.
I was thinking that I love your obvious interactivity. It's about interactivity for you.
Yes. Yeah, it's totally jazz. It's my, as a young person, I think being nurtured in and being schooled in jazz and the tradition of being in the moment.
And listening.
Listen to whoever's beside you.
Yeah.
Listen to the sounds around you, the drummer, the guitarist, the pianist. They've just said, da-ga-da-ba-da-da, and what am I going to say back? It's always about conversation and trying to bring, and for me, that's bringing humanity into the creative process. And that's not to say I wouldn't do an out-and-out straight electronic record, but even in that, there has to be a sense of, for my voice anyway, that I am dialoguing. And like I said, I mean, it's a bit of a joke, but I honestly feel like I'm singing to this U87. I'm singing and I'm having a conversation with this bit of music tech. And the way the sound is coming back to me makes me react, and so this kind of reaction and interaction then would enable me to figure out, okay, so right, maybe I need to work with these sound toys here. Maybe I need to work with these native instruments here, or whatever plugins are at my disposal to feel like, okay, this is gluing. We're now one thing. We're like, there's a symbiosis going on with the sonics, my vocals, my vocal delivery, but also kind of not being precious about. I'm not one for it's just my choice that I try and I keep away from auto-tune unless it's like I'm using it as a device, because at the end of the day, I'm a human being, man. I want to sound human. I want to, part of what music making for me is documenting that I was here. And
authenticity.
The authenticity that's left for my kid, left for anyone who hears it, whenever they hear it, however they hear it, whether I'm here, dead or alive. Do you know what I mean? Like that is actually, that's a core value for me, as a writer, as a producer. So I think that does impact the choices that I make in quite a fundamental way in terms of what I'm using. Like you said, it was going back to that curiosity key, and also using this as a tool. It's nothing more, nothing less.
Wonderful. So how does all that work live then? If you have had all those plug-in chains, how do you connect all the musicians to all the plugins live?
Well, we've only just started out on our live journey, and I brought an MD in because, Ableton seems to be the DAW that works best for live. And I've got limited knowledge of Ableton. I'm still working. I respect how incredibly powerful it is, and what it's enabled artist to do. But there are some things about it that I'm trying to work out. I think the live performer in me, instinctual performer, is still trying to work out how to use Ableton to enable me to be that and not feel locked in, because I don't like being locked in, Caro. I don't like it at all. It's just like, okay, we press play and then there's a sort of beginning and then there's an end.
Yeah, you need room for improvisation, you need room for responding again, don't you?
Yeah. How do we go off piste with this tech? And that's still, I mean, like I said, it's early days. We did our London launch at Rough Trade East and had a phenomenal time, going to a couple of other spots around the country, and thinking about, setting up my live dates from November this year. I'm curious as to how my journey is going to go to enable me to work with Ableton in such a way that it doesn't hem me in, because I'm not up for being hemmed in. Neither am I up for the band being hemmed in, because actually the reason why I've got other human beings on the stage is to play with them. I'm still looking to be surprised. I'm still looking to be challenged by them as artists, as musicians, as performers in their own right. So the technology has to, I have to find a way for the technology to slot into that philosophy, if you see what I mean. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm feeling like I've sort of woken up 10 years later into a world where actually people feel like quite comfortable slotting into the technology, not the other way around. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, no, would you disagree?
Well, I think because I've come from starting with the technology, I think I've only become a musician via the technology, if you know what I mean. So in that sense, I think I'm always looking, and I am very intuitive in my approach.
Right.
And composition. So I think there is a way, but it's almost probably having the space and time to be able to play around with it, so that you can sculpt it and you can train it to be your
absolutely
to be your tool, your bespoke tool. So hopefully that person will be an enabler for Ableton.
Absolutely.
I think it can do that.
Of all the doors, yes, that's what I can see. Ableton is going to enable me to be that and do that.
What are you actually wanting Ableton to do then? So are you wanting it to do any playback of music, or is it more about effects and almost live mixing, which you can do a lot easier now with Ableton?
Yeah, both.
Right.
Both really, but it's also whoever's controlling it, isn't it as well? It's also down to the arrangement.
Yeah.
But also then how a human has to control that arrangement, as opposed to just like, okay, we just run this thing from beginning to end.
Yeah.
So I think it's the way in which it's the design.
Definitely.
But what is for sure, like you said, Caro, is that it's capable. It's more than capable.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about how it connects with Max MSP, and in terms of controlling lighting and all that. This is now like super exciting.
Yes. I was playing with an app recently. A guy called Simon's made a thing called I can't remember his surname, unfortunately. He's made a thing called Flowfile, which is basically you can have it on your phone, on like an Apple Watch or whatever. All right. And by gestures, a bit like the Mimu gloves, that kind of idea. So you can do a lot by physical gesture, and you can be doing your effects and stuff by physical gesture. There's so much there. I think it is just having that space to work it out. And also finding that YouTuber, if they have done it already, or if not, you need to be documenting it. You need to be documenting your process so that other YouTubers can go, oh, good, I can come to Ableton with a jazz mind.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because I did get the Genki ring just to play with. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but yeah. So had a little bit of fun with playing with that. Still not sure where I'm going with it yet, but other ways in which we can kind of sort of control. Just trying to figure out how to do it in a slick way for live performance. But so the nice thing is that there's still lots to explore with the project, with this album project. Now we're moving into the live phase of it. So yeah, that's super exciting. Super exciting. Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. Well, it's been really lovely talking to you and unpacking some of your process and stuff. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, all the best with your continued adventures in music.
Thank you. And likewise, Caro.
Thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes and further information, as well as links and details of the other episodes in the electronic music series. And just before you go, let me point you to soundonsound.com/podcasts, where you can explore what's on our other channels. This has been a Caro C production for Sound on Sound.